Hello, hi there. So, one thing that some podcasts like that never blow up get wrong is that they're too scared to share like personal information. And this is a very unfortunate thing that our society has come to nowadays, that like the only podcasts that blow up are podcasts that are willing to share things about their lives that nobody else is willing to share, but things that everybody's going to be interested. So I'm talking about drama, I'm talking about like dark secrets, I'm talking about it could be illegal, even it could be things that were illegal. You'll have tons of people go on podcasts, talk about their former life as a criminal, and these are juicy things that people want to hear about. But that's the dilemma, because if you try to go halfway in starting a podcast and you're only going to talk about some juicy details, but you're not going to just give everything, you're not just going to give up your privacy. And I say privacy for no apparent reason. I've been watching a lot of British YouTube, but your privacy, if you're not willing to give up your privacy, you're not going to have a good podcast. And this is coming from a guy who doesn't have a podcast. I just watch podcasts, but I'm just thinking about the podcasts I watch and thinking about failed podcasts that never get past that like 50 subscriber mark. People aren't going to sit there and listen to 2 hours of you talking about you going to the grocery store, you going to, you walking down the street and, seeing some random funny person who did, something funny. That may last for like a minute, okay? Like that, fair enough, could be the intro. Maybe you like a certain drink at the grocery store. Cool. Let's move past it. Let's get to the juicy stuff. If there is no juicy stuff, we're not listening, we're clicking off, And that is, it's pretty sad in one way, because, podcast personalities, unless they're, even if they're a comedian, they're giving out things that are like most people would feel disgusted or ashamed to share. And that's why they're so good. That is why they're so good. It's interesting, like topical podcasts that you find on Spotify and things like that. I really do feel like those are kind of outdated, and like a lot of podcasts, they could be about, an interesting topic, and then it'll sound like a radio, like NPR show. And those are like the worst podcasts to listen to. Like they don't get that many views because they're just not as juicy as these new like tell-all reality style, like even worse than reality, like I'm gonna show you the craziest, wildest parts of my life and maybe even embellish a little bit about it. But I just had to talk about this because I think everybody at one point has been like, let me start a podcast, and that's the biggest dilemma. Is like, me right now, I'm an unknown person who, has a very private life. I do post on social media, I post these little shorts on here, I'll post a vlog here and there, but not all my life is out there. People wouldn't be able to probably write a pretty good Wikipedia about me. There's not that much out there to use. Let me turn right here. But I do want to start a podcast, and my worry is like, is it possible to just have a successful podcast if you're not saying some crazy stuff? Like, what if I don't want to share all my darkest secrets? Is there a market for that still? And, obviously, I don't know if there is. You kind of already have to have something that people are watching you for. Like, are you famous for something else? And then you start a podcast. That's like the easiest route to take, probably, is if you already have an audience, then yeah, start a podcast. But like the concept of building a podcast from the ground up with like no like edge to it doesn't sound possible to me. Can somebody share with me a podcast where that's happened, where it's a pretty clean podcast? I know there's like topical podcasts that are like science-based, you know, and that have a lot of research. But if it's going to be purely like personality-based, and maybe you're getting guests on there, guests is one thing. You can bring on a edgy guest, and like you don't have to be the edgy person, but the guest can be edgy. That's one way around it. That's one way around it. But God forbid you have an episode just by yourself, you know, without a guest, because then you're screwed unless you've already built your following. But yeah, it is kind of like a paradox. Like, I don't even know if it is a true paradox, but it's you kind of got to go all or nothing with that sort of thing, I feel like. Nope, I'm gonna turn. You gotta go all or nothing. So I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'm gonna be like, who cares? I'm gonna show you all those bodies I have under the bridge. I'm gonna talk about that because that'll be an interesting thing on my podcast. But until then, and JK, that was a joke. If you're not, you know, that was a joke. Obviously, I don't have a podcast, so you don't know my sense of humor like that. But that was a joke. Anyways, I don't think it's possible. You tell me what you think down in the comments. See you later.